yes, I will go ahead. Yeah.
Okay.
So very good evening to all of you. Indeed, it's a pleasure to have um, all the participants, my wonderful Exicom members, and other members who've joined this evening for the very first webinar of Mysore subsection. As you know, we are very privileged to have a subsection for the Mysore region. So we have over 14 institutions who are their IEEE student chapters, student branches. And today we have the privilege of having a guest who is eminent in the background of AI and machine learning, and he's also on the Mysore subsection Exicom. So we're very grateful to Dr. Hiranmaya Ghosh, who's joined us today to deliver a lecture on blockchain and cryptography. Uh, so I think in a few minutes we will be sharing his slides. Um, I also take the privilege of welcoming our chair-elect, Dr.
Well,
Brahmachari.
some speech you
Yeah,
can request Priya, madam.
yeah, yeah. Anyway, that I will do that. Yeah. So I also have Dr. Radhakrishna Rao and other team members here. So with all of you in the midst, I open this webinar session of the first one being from the Mysore subsection. Over to Priya. Can you please go ahead and do the welcome address? Yeah.
Uh,
Priya,
Am I audible now?
please be a little louder.
Am I audible?
You are, but very feeble. Go ahead, Priya. Priya, please
Hello.
go ahead. Yes, you're audible now. Yeah, please go ahead.
Hello. Hello.
Yes, Priya, please go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. Greetings to one and all. I, Ms. Priya Miss, have great pleasure in welcome to the first web on behalf of IEEE subsection in association with IEEE Bangalore section. I'm privileged to welcome today's eminent speaker, Dr. Ghosh, Adjunct Faculty, IIT Delhi, ESCOM member, IEEE subsection. Welcome, sir. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome the chair of IEEE subsection, Dr. Bindu Thomas, Professor and Head, Department C, PIET, Mysore. Welcome. I'm happy to welcome the Vice Chair of IEEE Mysore subsection, Dr. Sudarshan Patil Kulkarni, Professor, Department C, SJC Mysore. Welcome, sir. I heartily welcome the Chair-elect of IEEE subsection, Dr. Professor and Department from DIIT Mysore. Welcome, you, sir. My warm welcome to the Secretary of IEEE Mysore subsection, Dr. K.A. Radha Krishna Rao, Professor, Department C, PSC, India. Sir, I heartily welcome to the Treasurer of IEEE Mysore subsection, Dr. Archana N.P., Professor and Department IEEE Mysore. I cordially welcome the event coordinators, Mr. K. Kumar M. IEEE subsection, Assistant Professor, Department of Telecom, GSSS IIT, and Mrs. Namrata D, ex-com member, IEEE subsection, and Assistant Professor, Department of DCE, Mysore. Both, a warm welcome to all ex-com members of IEEE subsection. On behalf of IEEE subsection, I wish all participants convenient welcome to this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Priya. I now request Namrata to read the profile of Professor.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
It's a privilege to introduce today's resource person, Dr. Hiranmay Ghosh. Hiranmay Ghosh received his PhD degree from Electrical Engineering Department, IIT Delhi. He received his BTech degree in Radio Physics and Electronics and BSc degree with honors in physics, both from the Calcutta University. His current research and academic interests center around computer vision, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and cognitive computing. Hiranmay had been associated with R&D and engineering activities for more than 40 years with reputed organizations, namely CMC, ECIL, CDOT, and TCS. He has been one of the core team members to develop the architecture of family of DSS while in CDOT. He had been invited by IIT Delhi, IIT Jodhpur, and NIT Karnataka, Surathkal to teach as adjunct, guest faculty, and has an overall teaching experience of more than 10 years. He has also been invited to deliver tutorials and invited talks by several academic institutions. He has authored a book on cognitive vision that has been recently published by Wheelie IEEE Press. Earlier, he had co-authored a book on multimedia ontology published by the CRC Press. He has written 3 book chapters. He has over 50 publications in reputed journals and peer-reviewed national and international conferences. He has several international patents. He has chaired conferences like PREMI 2019, WIC 2014, and CODS 2014. He was also steering committee member and technical expert in Indo-EU Research Collaboration Project, Synchronizer and Spirit, and in Media Lab Asia Human Simulator Project. Dr. Ghosh is the recipient of several TCS Special Initiative Award, TCS Service and Commitment Award, TCS Outstanding Contribution Award, TCS Great Performance Award for contribution to the development of family of C.DSS. He is also a senior member of IEEE, life member of IUPRAI, and a member of ACM. On behalf of IEEE Mysore subsection, I extend a hearty welcome to you, sir. I now request Dr. Hiranmay Ghosh to take over the session. Over to you, sir.
Hello. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are.
Okay. So first and foremost, my apologies for having a little confusion joining in some whatever technical trouble I had at my end. And I thank you for the introduction, and I thank the Mysore IEEE Society for inviting me in this particular talk. So as we have lost some more time, it is about 20 minutes we are running behind. So let me just get into the presentation. Yeah, I have structured my talk in 2 parts. In the first part, I'll be talking about money and banking to give a background of what is the cryptocurrency all about and what we want to achieve with it. And in the second part, I'll get into some technical details. about the cryptocurrency. Now, each of the slides are supposed to take about 20. I planned about 20 minutes or so, but probably I'll cut short a bit if possible. So with this background, let us start. And I plan to have at least some 5 minutes of discussion towards the end of the talk. Okay. So starting with we are on slide number 2 right now. I think the slide is visible to everybody on the first module. Dr. Prasad, the previous slide, please. Yeah, let us start from here. So all of you know probably what is money. You deal with it every day. So we won't talk about it right now, but we'll revisit it as we go on. And you know that there are two types of money that you deal with every day. I mean, some coins and some banknotes. Let us see what they are. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay. If you have looked carefully on the banknotes, you will see something written below. I promise to pay the bearer the sum of 500 rupees. That means this paper that you are holding on your hand is not 500 rupees, right? It is a promise to, it is a hand note, it is a promise for somebody, the governor of the RBI, to pay you 500 rupees. So what is that 500 rupees? So let us see how money evolved gradually and what are the different forms of money today we have. Next slide, please. Okay. Many of you may be knowing that economy started with a barter system. Like in a typical rural setup, suppose there were a farmer and a fisherman. The farmer takes the grains to the fisherman and in return gets some fish so that both are happy. They can have a meal of maybe rice and fish. Okay. But now soon complication starts. Let us move to the next slide. There are more economic players. The milkman is also there. So maybe the farmer goes to the fisherman goes to the milkman comes to the farmer. But there's so many other complications happen that maybe I have grains as a farmer. I don't want fish. I want milk and fish both. Or maybe the quantity of grain I have is much more than what amount of fish or the milk I need as on today. I may need some more day after tomorrow. I can save the grains, but not the fish and the milk. So what to do? So when there are multi-party barter, this sort of came in, there are lots of logistic issues also came in. So how to solve the problem? Next slide, please. Well, people thought that look, if we have some sort of a token, like that token that probably you use in coffee shop today, you go to the counter, you pay some money, get a token, you take the token to the coffee counter and get some coffee. Like that, if we have some tokens, so when the farmer goes to the fisherman and gives some grains, the fisherman gives some token. The farmer saves it. Whenever he needs it, he will use it. Maybe sometime later, he goes to the milkman, gives some of the tokens, and gets some milk. Maybe he takes some of the tokens to the fisherman again and gets some fish also. Similarly, when the fisherman gives the fish to the milkman, he gets some token in return. And like that, the token becomes the common thing which changes hand as and when you exchange goods. So that token is what is called the money. Next slide, please. Now, what should be the nature of the token? what are the properties of good money? First of all, it should be recognized as a medium of exchange. It should be accepted in a domain or a context. I mean, why it may not be universally accepted. For example, if you see Indian rupees today in one form of money, it is accepted inside India, and so on and so forth. Right? Previous slide, please. Previous slide, please. Dr. Parameshwari, previous slide, please. Previous. Let us go back 2 steps. Previous one. Yeah, there we are. Okay. Secondly, it should be a store of value. That is, whatever you can do with the money, it should be, you can store it for some time. Like if you keep it with you, I mean, today, suppose with some amount of suppose with 2 tokens, you get a bottle of milk. Tomorrow also, with the 2 tokens, you should get a bottle of milk, right? Of course, the exchange value for the different commodities may have some long-term variation or seasonal variation, etc. But that's okay. But generally, it should be more or less constant, and it should be durable. I mean, it should not. I mean, if you keep milk, I mean, it will rot. It should not be like that. It should be something which stays with you. Thirdly, you should be able to do some sort of accounting with that. You should be able to compare the price of 2 commodities. One bottle of milk is 2 tokens, and one big fish is 4 tokens. So you can see, and if you have a bottle of milk and 2 fishes, you have in total 6 tokens worth of thing, and so on. Next, it should be scarce, because if they are available in plenty, then it won't make sense, right? And it should be controlled. It should not be, you should not be able to produce it whenever you feel like, and you should not be able to fake it. Then it can be divided into small parts. Like if you have X units of money, you can part with Y and keep the rest with you. It should be uniform. All units must be identical, and it should be portable, that you can easily carry it. Like you can carry the notes in your purse, and you can get it exchanged very easily. And it should be secure, that it cannot be stolen easily. Our current money is not so. If you, I mean, there are lots of pickpockets around, so it can be lost anytime. Okay, let's move to the next slide. Next slide, please. So if you see money through the edges, different things have been used as money. I mean, gold coins with various precious metals, then copper coins, seashells, stones, and I mean, just a man is standing by the side to see the size of the stone. These are all monies used in different countries, different places, and even salt. At one point of time, and salt was a very scarce commodity in India, and so salt was used to make payments to the, and from that the word, like if you know Hindi a bit, Nimak Haram and all these things comes from that. I mean, who doesn't? Who takes the salt, that is, who takes the salary from somebody and then does something wrong. Okay. So there is a very wide variety of commodity things which have been used as money through the ages. Okay, let's move on. Next slide, please. Just a question. I mean, maybe if we just think about, can we use fish for money? Probably it is not a very good solution, because fish will rot. You cannot keep it with you, so it cannot be a store for value. And similarly, if you look at the different things, you'll find something can work for money and something may not. And in this context, there is one video, probably, no, we won't play it now. So whenever you can, probably you'll get the copy of these slides. So you can, at your leisure, you can look at the video, and that's a very good discussion on what is money. So let's move on. Next slide, please.
Professor, can I play the YouTube?
No, we are not going to play the YouTube now. There is not enough time for it. So we'll move. We'll go to the next slide. Okay. Now, another interesting concept in money is, just a moment, is something of promissory note. We have seen this slide earlier. So what is it? So suppose you go to the farmer goes to the fisherman, and the fisherman doesn't have anything to pay with. So he writes a piece of hand note. He says, look, I acknowledge your debt. I've got so much of grains of soil, so much quantity of grains. And whenever you come back to me, I'll give you fish against that note. Now, trouble is, can it be trusted? Okay, with all good intention, when the farmer needs fish, that day the fisherman may not have caught anything, or he may not be available for whatever reason. Can he take this note to the milkman and get some milk? The milkman may say, oh, I don't know who is that fisherman. How should I trust that note? And so on. So next slide, please. Next slide, please. So now the question comes of trust. So now a trusted party comes in, and suppose a trusted party, maybe the king of the country, or a sovereign government, or somebody, as some big businessman or a bank, reputed bank, he issues the promissory note. Promissory note can be used in the economic cycle just like money. Right? So that's how the cash comes in, what we call the bank notes or cash come in. And it is often a legal binding that you should accept it as a money within that country. Okay, let's move on. Next slide, please. So, in summary, we see that there are three kinds of money. One is the commodity itself, a valuable or scarce commodity, like a piece of gold, a cup of salt, or things like that. It can be representation money that represents some valuable commodity, that it is like a hand note, which says, I promise to pay the bearer of the note some good things, some good commodity. Or it can be fiat money, which is just based on trust. I mean, there is no promise. This is just like a hand note. But people say that, yeah, use it as a money by government order or by general consensus, that we decide to use some sort of a token as money, though it doesn't have any real value in terms of a commodity like a piece of gold or a cup of salt like that. So why I bring in these points is that today, if you see, I mean, when you go into cryptocurrency, we'll see that cryptocurrency will come in the category of fiat money. And similarly, fiat money, other examples are the dollar, which is accepted anywhere in the world, and probably it is also very appreciated and cherished very much. So, I mean, if you take the dollar, the US government doesn't promise to pay you something, unlike the Indian Reserve Bank notes, right, which promises to pay you worth of 500 rupees. Okay. Next slide, please. Now coming to banking. So bank now operates as a trusted party. And so I won't get into details with it. Look, what happens is ultimately suppose both the farmer and the fisherman both have got bank accounts. And then when the farmer pays to the fisherman, actually no money changes hand. The farmer tells the bank that please pay him some 20 units of money, whatever it is. And there will be some bookkeeping done. The fisherman's account will be enriched by 20 units and the farmer's account will be deducted by 20 units, and that's all, right? So ultimately nothing, no commodity or nothing changes hand in that process. Okay, so and the bank becomes a trusted party. The bank's account book, we trust, we say that when the bank says that, look, you have some 100 rupees in your credit, well, we trust the bank. Bank can fail also. Okay, over to the next slide. Next slide, please. Yeah. Now, what is wrong with a trusted party? The trusted party can start dictating the terms because he's the center, he's controlling everything. The trusted party can go insolvent. Recently, you heard about some Yes Bank story. All of you may be knowing that. Even a country may go insolvent, a sovereign country. I mean, that causes huge inflation. Like after the World War, many of the European countries face that fate. Tomorrow, God forbid, if the US dollar sinks, if the US economy goes for a shambles, the entire world economy goes for a shambles because everything trusts US dollars. Okay. And another thing, whether it's a problem or not a problem, that is questionable, but the trusted party gets access to all your transaction information. Because whenever you make a transaction, it is sort of vetted by the or validated by the that trusted party. Like in a bank, when you say I pay so and so rupees 100, then actually you are telling the bank and that I'll be paying that 100 rupees should be transferred from my account to his account. Bank knows it and bank needs to approve it so that before the transaction can be made. So these are the three issues. And as the bank has this information, it can be deceived. Nowadays, there are lots of hue and cry about the privacy thing. Okay. Move over to the next slide, please. Okay, so if we look at some of the compare the two things like cash and electronic banking from a few parameters, we could compare the other parameters as well, but let us see a few parameters and see how they compare. To look at portability for cash, it is poor because you have to actually physically meet that person and hand over the money, right? It is of course much better than the huge stone pieces which were used in money in one time in some country. Electronic banking, it is high. Sitting at your home, you can pay anybody anywhere in the country or even overseas. Privacy in cash, it is high. I mean, money is changing hand. It is known between you and who is getting the money, receiving the money, and who is giving the money. Nobody else comes to know about it. Good and bad, all the black money and everything starts with that. In electronic banking, it doesn't happen. It's poor. Every transaction is being recorded somewhere. So somebody knows it can be audited and there is little chance of this black money and or money being used for some wrong sort of activities like drug peddling or terrorism. Those chances get reduced. Third party approval in cash not needed. I am having cash in my pocket, I give it to you. Nobody else needs to approve. Electronic banking, the bank has to approve. Security, poor. because, I mean, the money can be picked up, cash can be picked up from the pocket. You can lose it easily. In electronic banking, it is much higher, notwithstanding all the hacking and all these things. Still, it is much higher than cash. Next slide, please. So this is the motivation of the cryptocurrencies. They can be combine the benefit of cash and electronic banking together. Like it can be unmediated like cash and privacy like cash, while portability and security like electronic banking. And terms and conditions will be democratically defined by the actual users. And there's no central control and no risk of breach of trust. So next slide, please. I think it brings us to the end of the first module. So there's a review question that why do we want to get rid of the central agency? So I think the answer is clear. We'll skip that for the moment. Let's move on. Yeah. So this is the end of module 1. And do you think I can take some questions right now, or we should directly jump to the next module, module 2?
We will take up questions in the end, sir.
So if that, okay, fine. Then let us move on to the module 2, because yeah, we're of course running short of time. Yeah. Okay. So now we will talk about distributed ledger and blockchain. So look, in the suppose all my economic players, like the farm in a community, like the farmer and the fisherman, the milkman, they anonymously say no to bank, and they say that we will maintain our own ledger. So they create a ledger somewhere, and where everybody can write, milkman and the farmer and fisherman, and whenever they use their own currency, call it whatever, maybe Bitcoin. Indeed, I mean, the way I'll proceed now, actually I'll build on Bitcoin, how Bitcoin works, but though I won't mention the name of Bitcoin, really. Sorry. So now, suppose the previous slide, please. So suppose the farmer makes a payment to the fisherman. He introduces one row there that fisherman he updates the ledger accordingly. Then milkman makes some payment to, let us say, farmer, and the milkman updates ledger accordingly, and so on and so forth. Now question comes, who hosts the ledger? So back to central authority again. There should be somebody hosting, and that will be the central authority. He can prevent somebody from writing. He may do whatever, and if that node collapses, if the central authority collapses, the ledger is lost. All these problems will happen. How to prevent wrong entries, either by mistake or deliberately by dishonesty? Suppose the farmer never paid a fisherman, but the fisherman makes such entry. How to prevent that? Okay, next slide, please. So the next evolution is these three economic players, like milkman and farmer and fisherman, they decide all of us will maintain our own ledger and will reconcile our all three ledgers should look alike. So whenever, let us say, farmer pays to the fisherman, he broadcasts that transaction information to all the economic players, all who are maintaining the ledger. So everybody updates their ledger. So theoretically, if everything works fine, all the ledgers will be in sync, all the ledgers will look alike. Periodically, they may reconcile, they may check each other's ledger, and everything will go smooth. But now, next slide, please. Next one. Yeah. But now the trouble comes. Look, now we are the engineers, we understand the difficulties. The nodes or networks may be unstable. So some message may have reached somebody, may not have reached somebody, right? So when for whatever, because of the network problem or the node problem, so how do you ensure the consistency of the ledgers? Of course, what if there's a dispute? I mean, either by error or by somebody making a dishonest entry in his own ledger. How do you resolve them? So let's see. Let's go ahead. How to solve these issues. Next slide, please. Okay. So what is done is, suppose if each transaction is signed by the pair, like today also we do it, like today also when I want to do some electronic payment, maybe through a check, I sign a check to so and so. So like that, if the transaction we maintain, we sign it, and then the signed transaction we broadcast to everybody, so people can keep it, and it cannot be disputed that yeah, that transaction was really there. Fine. And so pair cannot deny that I have made the transaction. So that is the first step. Next slide, please. And so we bring in digital signature. Now, on the paper when we sign, we just put our signature, and in many forms, etc., you might have seen that you have to when you have to put electronic signature, where you probably write your name in a very stylized font, or probably your signature you scan and upload. But that is not digital signature. Please understand that a digital signature is actually a function of a signatory's identity as well as the document contents. So that, and it is attached to a document. It cannot be copied from one document to another. So ultimately, it is a bit string. So what could happen? It is very easy to fake the digital signature. You can just do a cut and paste. You can take it from one document to put in another document. But as is a function of the document contents, you cannot do it. Another property of digital signature is that only authorized signatory can create this signature. It will be very extremely difficult to forge, but anybody can easily verify. Okay. Next slide, please. So these are some technical details of digital signature. Let us be short on it. It basically works on two keys, a secret key and a public key. So there are three functions here which are required. First of all, you generate the keys, your secret key and the public key. And then when you sign a message with the secret key, so that it is possible only for the only the owner keeps the secret key, nobody else knows it. So only the owner can sign. And as it is specific to a document, like it is a function of the message also, that it cannot be copy paste to another. And you can verify with the public key, which is known to everybody. And the verify function returns only either true or false. True means, yeah, it is really, this message is really signed by this public key, or it is not. Okay, over to the next slide, please. Next one, yeah, and next. Yeah. Yeah. Now, the digital signature also brings in anonymity or privacy of the user, because the user in the system will be known by the public key alone, and the real identity is not disclosed. And also a user can have as many accounts as he likes with different identities or different public keys, and he can create all the public keys on his own without approaching any central authority. So this can be good or bad. I mean, once the identity of a person who is playing in the economics unknown is become anonymized, I mean, bad means it can be used for some illegal purposes like drug peddling and terrorism funding and things like that. Good is that you won't get lots of spam messages who actually is studying your expenses pattern and sends lots of advertisements to you and things like that. Nowadays, people are researching on some data mining techniques by tracking the patterns, etc., to trace the real identities from the public keys. So that's a new line of research. Okay, to the next slide, please. So let us, okay, now that we know that now we have said that a fake transaction cannot be generated because every transaction is signed and the authenticity of the transaction can be verified and the transaction can be anonymous from one public key to another. But can a transaction be deleted in a ledger? People are maintaining ledgers. One can now, probably yes, you can delete a transaction. Can a transaction be duplicated? Yes, you can duplicate. Because as the rest of the message content, the rest of the transaction is identical, your signature also will be identical. So if you just copy paste one record, in that case, the entire record, including the signature, then that will be a valid record. So now let us try to find out how to prevent that. Next slide, please. So this is a technique of hashing that is used. That is at the core of this thing. So hashing in a nutshell is like this. It is basically a transfer mapping function y is equal to hx from what is called the data space to a hash space, but the inverse function does not exist. So given y, you cannot find x very easily. Why I say very easily? You can try on all possible values of x and you will hit y because you know what is hx. From x to y you can find easily. And if you, I'll explain it with one example, right? So you can, with trial and error only, you should be able to find, given y, you should be able to find an x. Next slide, please. For example, suppose we have our birthday in DDMM format. For example, x is equal to 3101 for 31st January. Now, I define my hash function like this, add the digits and take the last digits, that is basically modulo 10. So, in our case, if x is equal to 3101, y will be 3 plus 1 plus 0 plus 1 modulo 10, that's equal to 5. Now, from 3101, you can easily find out 5. But if I tell you 5 is my hash value, can you find out 3101? No. But as your data space has just 365 or 366 in the leap year distinct values, you can keep on trying. You try with 1st January 0101. Oh, it doesn't map to 5. So it is not the one. Then try 2nd January. It also doesn't. And so on and so forth. As you go on, somewhere you will hit 31st January and you will know. So yeah, so for 31st January, the hash will be 5. Fine. Now, here, there are only 365 values, so it is easy. If there are many more values, things will be much more difficult. You may need to have much more processing. Next slide, please. Now, typically a hash space is generally much smaller than the data space, and hence there are collisions of it. That is, there exists number x1 and x2 and y such that y is hash of both x1 and x2. But if the hash space is sufficiently large, chances of collision is less. But even if it happens, it doesn't matter in the way it is used. Now, we have already said, given y, it is difficult to find x such that y is equal to hx, and we have illustrated with an example. But if the hash space is big, for example, if it comprises of 256 bits, then there can be 2 to the power 256 distinct possible values, and hence the average search complexity will be on the order of 2 to the power 128, which is in the order of 3.4 into 10 to the power 38. That's a huge number, and it is beyond the realm of the computing capability of any individual or even a group of individuals as on date, not even a supercomputer. Now, again, we are not discussing the algorithms for the hashing algorithm. I'm giving a reference. Whoever wants to look into it can look in. This is a good article. I'm a good. Over to the next slide, please. Now, a blockchain is, by the way, we are at 16:57. Can I go for some 5 minutes beyond, 5 to 10 minutes beyond time?
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Thank you. So in blockchain, what happens is all the transactions are put in a linked list. And along with the linked list, another thing is kept. That is called the hash of the previous block. If you take the entire previous block, like suppose you are working on block 3, in that you take the block 2, the previous block, as the data or the message, and you compute the hash of it with some hash function, which is predefined. Hash 256 is generally used. I mean, SHA 256. And you save the hash of the previous block together with it. Now, this makes the linked list tamper-proof. How? Because if you want to change some data in block 1, what will happen? The hash of it will change. That means block 2 has to be redone, and as you do it, hash of block 2 will change. So you'll have to redo hash 3, and so on and so forth. You have to change the entire link, all the blocks, and that will again be a huge amount of work. Okay. Now, by the way, when you do the hash, it is not exactly the message. I'll talk about in a couple of slides later. It is something more difficult to do. You are finding the hash of a block is easy. It doesn't take much computing time, but it is actually something else, a little more difficult stuff. Okay, so let us assume now. You might have heard the term hash pointer. Hash pointer is one of the buzzwords in the blockchain technology. So it is nothing but a link, as in a linked list, in a one-way linked list, and a hash of the previous block. And once a block is created, it cannot be tampered with. So our transactions are safe. Nobody can delete a transaction. Nobody can duplicate a transaction within a block. And by the way, within a block, there is not one transaction, but again, for the sake of efficiency, there are multiple transactions stored in a block. And they are organized in a tree, which is called a Merkle tree. We won't talk about it in today's lecture. Next slide, please. Okay, blockchain and traceability. So as you see, as all the transactions are in the linked list, all the transactions can be traced back. So let's assume to begin with, players are given some coins by the system. How? We'll talk about it later. Subsequently, each coins change hand. So each coin can be traced from its current owner and back to its genesis following the blockchain. So through a chain of these digitally signed transactions. So spurious coins cannot be introduced, and nobody can steal coins from you. It is they all can be traced. Okay. Next slide, please. Now, who creates the block? The thing is, there is no central agency to allocate the responsibility. There is no central agency to tell the fisherman, now you create it, or to the milkman, now you create it. So it is modeled, I mean, again, that is democratically decided by everybody for every block. How it is done? The creation of block is modeled as a puzzle, and one has to solve the puzzle. Whoever can solve the puzzle first, he comes to create a block. So what you have to do is, one needs to create the hash of another string called nonce concatenated with the block. It is not just the block. And that hash must fall in a very narrow range of the hash space. And so how you can find, so the puzzle is to find a suitable nonce which will make the hash to fall in that narrow space. So how do you do it? The only way to do it is by trial and error. You try one nonce, it doesn't work. You try another, it doesn't work, and so on and so forth. Right? And this effort, this is called Bitcoin mining, and it takes a huge amount of a huge amount of processing power. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah. Now, if it consumes a huge amount of processing power, why one should spend that processing power to create a block? And why one should be honest about it? I mean, if I'm allowed to create a block, probably I can as well keep a few transactions. They are fake transactions which shows some money has been paid to me, right? Now, there's a monetary incentive for creating a block. A few bitcoins are mined and added to the account of this successful miner. Whoever solves the puzzle, he gets rewarded with a few bitcoins. He may also get a transaction fee. This is optional, it's not mandatory nowadays, for every transaction that are included in the block. And by the way, this information that the reward that the miner got gets added into the same block which he has mined as a transaction, that the system has paid this fellow so much of so much coin. Okay. Now, can a miner be dishonest? The system is worked a majority consensus. So somebody introduces and dishonest block, it is all likely to be thrown away. Sometimes it may not be, but there are certain techniques which we ain't get into today, like double spending. I mean, this is a little more complex affair. We won't talk about it today, but there are techniques to do it. Now, and if a block that you have mined gets thrown out, then you have no way to materialize your incentive because the information was added to the same block which got thrown out. So there is a strong incentive to remain honest and a strong incentive to create the blocks. Next slide, please. Now, we have said that scarcity is one of the properties of good money. Now, as we say that if every people goes on mining and mining and mining, there will be more and more Bitcoin coming in, an unlimited supply of Bitcoins, and that will be, the value of Bitcoin will reduce in that case. So how it is done is, the mining reward decreases in a geometric progression. It started with 50 Bitcoins per block mined in 2014 when Bitcoin started, and halved whenever every 210,000, and 2 lakhs odd blocks have been mined. Current reward from February 2020 is about 6.25 Bitcoins per block. So what happens is, if you see the total number of bitcoins that will be ever mined, it is 50 plus 25 plus 12.5 plus 6.25, etc., all multiplied by 210,000. And if you see, it is simply geometric progression. If you solve it, you can see the total number of bitcoins that will ever mined is finite. It comes to 2,100,000 and no more. Okay, so that's how the Bitcoin is kept scarce. Okay, there will never be an unlimited supply of it. Next slide, please. Okay, so let us see. These are some of the good properties of good money we have discussed in the earlier in module 1. So let us see what we have achieved in Bitcoin. Let's critically look at it. Medium of exchange. Well, it is accepted in a community, in a cyber community, though not everybody accepts it. You go to any store in your neighborhood shop, they don't accept Bitcoin. But there is a strong internet community who accepts Bitcoin, and in that community, it is a medium of exchange. Unfortunately, a large portion of the community is doing something wrong, like drug peddling is one of the major activities, and terrorism funding also, and that's why many of the governments sort of wants to restrict the use of Bitcoin. Store of value. Yeah, it is a good store of value, of course. As is an electronic token, it doesn't lose its value. Indeed, the value of Bitcoins have been rising phenomenally over the years, which was a few paise maybe when the Bitcoin started, or maybe a few rupees. Now, today, as on today, each Bitcoin is about 15 lakh rupees. Okay. It is a good unit of account. Yeah, with Bitcoin, just like rupees, you can evaluate your asset. You can compare the price of two assets and so on and so forth. It is scarce. We have just discussed that there is no unlimited supply of Bitcoins. Divisibility. We are always talking about coins. We have not discussed today that how it can be divided. But yes, Bitcoin is divisible. Ultimately, if you have, let us say, a 5 Bitcoin, a 5 units of Bitcoin, that is 1 Bitcoin of value 5, you can spend 3 Bitcoins and keep 2. Portable, as it's an electronic token, it is very much portable. Security, yeah, without your secret key, you cannot use it, and nobody else will know the security. Sometimes it appeared to be a little over secure. What happened very recently is somebody forgot his secret key, and in the process, he has no means to get back whatever Bitcoins he had in his accounts, and that was some millions of dollars worth. Recently, it happened, and here, as Bitcoin is totally democratic, there is nobody, no central authority. He cannot approach anybody to say, please, by proving his identity, that please reset my password or some such thing. That is simply not possible. And anonymity, of course, whether I'm a good or not, we don't know. That's why we read it with red. And as we have seen, that Bitcoin works only with your identity is your public key, and you can have as many as you like. And your actual identity is not disclosed. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so just the last slide. If we go beyond, blockchain is now being used beyond cryptocurrency. The currency, the monetary system is not the only thing. The core idea in blockchain is basically distributed sharing of resources with accountability. It can be money, it can be something other than money as well. And hence there are many other uses of blockchain beyond cryptocurrency. A coin may represent any resource. For example, a football match ticket with a seat number maybe in the stadium, right? It can be a normal coin, or so you can have your Bitcoin like that. It can change, it can be bought and sold and all these things, right? And ultimately, when you go to the stadium, if you quote your coin, you will be shown a seat. You can redeem it. Or normal Bitcoins can also be sort of colored or annotated to be used as some sort of other tickets. Then there another interesting is a smart contract. Where there another cryptocurrency called Ethereum. And Ethereum has a protocol for a smart contract. What's a smart contract? It's a contract which gets executed automatically when some conditions are met. And in consequence, some resources will change hand. For example, in share market, suppose you want to buy some share for not more than a certain value. So you create a smart contract for it. And another person who wants to sell a share, he creates a smart contract that I want to sell it for no less than a certain value. And if these two contracts are sort of agree, my my maximum value is less than his minimum value, then those shares can automatically change hand and things like that. And even in IoT domain, the smart objects, the access to the smart objects can be controlled through this sort of blockchain and smart contract. And in all these cases, it all happens without a central control. That is the beauty of it. It happens in a truly distributed system. And I have not put it in the slides as I was jotting down the slides in today morning itself, somebody has pointed to me to a website called Indicoin, indicoin.org.in. I have not put it in the slides. If you like, you can see it. I don't understand this slide. I didn't have find much time to really to go through it carefully. But this is a blockchain initiative in social service sector in India. Maybe if you like, you can look into it. Okay, next slide, please. So I think we are at the end of our talk. And sorry once again for the technical problems. I am now ready for questions if there is any.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir, for sparing your time for today's webinar. It was indeed a very informative session. We have a question posed. I'll just read out the question. How to identify fake digital currency or cryptocurrency?
Sorry, can you repeat the question once again?
Yeah. How do we identify fake digital currency or cryptocurrency?
Okay. Look, first of all, if you fake it out, you cannot bring it inside the system. Because what is currency here? Currency is nothing but a transaction record saved in a blockchain. And how do you bring it in a blockchain? If you have created a wrong transaction, you cannot bring it into the blockchain. But suppose while creating a blockchain, you have created a fake transaction showing some money being paid to you by anybody, maybe by the system or maybe by some other person. As I told, as it is a spurious blockchain which nobody else agrees to, it will be thrown out of the system. Even if it is not thrown out right now, you somehow manage to put it in the chain, very soon it will be detected and it will be thrown out of the system by the conscientious approach. The details we have not discussed really in this talk because the details it will take a little long time. The double spending, those who are interested can look into how to prevent double spending. There, this question is answered there.
Thank you, sir, for patiently answering the questions. Any more questions can be posted in the chat box. The feedback form is shared in the chat box. Kindly enter the feedback form to get your certificates. So as we come to the end of the webinar, I request Mrs. Namrata D. Cruz, Assistant Professor, Department of ECE, VVIET Mysuru, and IEEE Exicom member to propose vote of thanks.
A very pleasant evening to all. The essence of all beautiful art is gratitude. I, Namrata D. Cruz, on behalf of IEEE Mysore subsection, take the privilege to propose the vote of thanks on this occasion. I convey deep regards and hearty thanks to the resource person of today's webinar, Dr. Hiranmay Ghosh, Adjunct Faculty, Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi, and also Exicom member of IEEE Mysore section, for accepting our invitation to deliver talk on blockchain and cryptocurrency and sharing his knowledge. Thank you very much, sir. I am extremely grateful to Dr. Bindu A. Thomas, Chair, IEEE Mysore subsection, and Professor and Head, Department of ECE, VVIET Mysore, who has been a pillar of support in organizing this event. Thank you, ma'am. My heartfelt gratitude to Dr. Padmesha Chari, Chair-elect of IEEE Mysore subsection, and HOD, Department of TCE, GSS IETW, Mysore, for the support and guidance he has extended to all of us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I wish to express my sincere thanks to the organizing committee, Dr. Sudarshan Patil Kulkarni, Vice Chair of IEEE Mysore subsection, Dr. K.A. Radhakrishna Rao, Secretary of IEEE Mysore subsection, and Dr. Archana N.V., Treasurer of IEEE Mysore subsection, for their support in conducting this event. My deep regards to all the Exicom members of IEEE Mysore subsection for their support and management. My special thanks to all the coordinator and volunteers for their support and teamwork in conducting this event successfully. I convey my thanks to all the participants for making time and attending this webinar. Hope the knowledge gained from this webinar will lay path to many young minds. I once again thank each and every one present here for making this first event of Mysore subsection a grand success. We look forward for the same support and encouragement in all the future initiatives of IEEE Mysore subsection. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, Namrata. And thank you, one and all, for your patient listening. Have a great day.
Yeah, Professor, one question is there in the chat window. Madam. Yeah, Professor, is blockchain is going to replace banking sector in future?
Sorry, can you repeat the question once more?
Yeah, is blockchain is going to replace banking sector in future, considering the cross-border payment process or complicated process?
This technology is quite promising, but what will happen in the future, predicting that could be difficult. At least it is upcoming, and it will be used in not only on maintaining ledger. It will be used to that foresee, but what will another technology coming and overtaking it, we never know.
Okay, thank you, Professor. I request all the participants to fill the feedback link to be posted in the chat window. We request all the participants to fill the feedback link to get the certificate by email. So please fill the feedback link We posted in the chat window. Thank you all. I think we can
Thank you,
conclude.
everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you, sir. Thank you once again for taking out time.
Yeah. Thank you all.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for your participation. Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks,
Good evening.
everybody. And
Thank
thank you,
you, Professor.
IEEE.
Yeah, thanks, Professor. It was wonderful speech. Thank you.
Can you share the feedback link once again, Kirti?
Yeah. Yes, madam. Shared actually.